Hi, good morning. Good morning. To be honest with you, when Dave texted me, I called him, literally called him. I'm like, hey, you mean because he says, hey, come in ready to do the meeting on Monday. And I'm like, you mean in the right mindset? Or he goes, no, do the meeting. I'm like, cool. And it's one of those things where we're believers here. And if you're watching in the academy, you're probably watching this in the mindset section. So you've picked up on the fact that our beliefs and what we believe in kind of shines through in our training and things of that nature. After the day that I had Friday, it's kind of funny how at your lowest point, sometimes what you would call your lowest point, or when your mindset's not right, is when God will step in and actually kind of want to use you. It's kind of like in that brokenness. So as I begin to think on kind of where we could go with this, it was the last day, our last day of the first quarter. And so we're starting a new quarter, a race, so to speak, because how many knows that sales is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So we finished the first leg of the race. And what came to my mind was this verse, Psalms 42, verse 1. It says, as the deer pants for the water brook, so my soul longs after you. And I began to think of a marathon runner. As you know, and could probably tell, I'm not a runner. I'm barely a walker at this point. But I know people, and there's people who go to my church who they run marathons, they train. And along the route of the race, there's hydration stations. There's places that they can stop along the way to get rehydrated again. And so I began to think of this verse, as a deer pants for the water brooks, so my soul longs after you. And I begin to think about sales and how sometimes we're pushing, especially towards the end of a month or the end of a quarter, and we begin to push so hard that we become weary, we become tired, we become worn out, some people may not believe in the term blacked out, but the reality is we become blacked out, we become thirsty. And I begin to think on this passage, and again, if you're not a believer, eat the meat, spit out the bones, but I believe that you're going to get more than just sales training and mindset training out of this. I begin to think of that imagery of a deer. The imagery of a deer. If you've ever saw a deer in the wild or something, it walks with grace. It walks with dignity. There's something majestic about a deer. It has agility. When the deer has the ability to run and move and adjust its course on a dime. A deer can be running through the forest, whether it's dodging bullets, whether it's running from a wildfire, no matter what it's doing, it has the ability to stop on a dime without the appearance of struggle and change its direction, to make an adjustment. It moves with grace and dignity without the appearance of a struggle. You also think of a duck, how a duck, it just glides on the water, but underneath, it's just flapping frantically. A deer, it has that. It has its seasons where it's grazing, where it's just walking through green pastures and green meadows, through the woods or over plains. But then it has its seasons where it's running and dodging bullets, or it's dodging predators. It's running from predators, like a gazelle running from a lion. Or maybe there's fires and it's trying to get out of dodge of these rapid moving fires. But the deers go through seasons. We as salespeople, we go through seasons where maybe it's a season where deals are chasing you down, where you're just tripping over deals, you're tripping over demos. You don't even know how, but somehow people are listening to you. But then you go through times where you can't remember your script to save your life. You hardly even know the name of your company or your callback number. We go through these seasons. But if you come back to the passage, it says, as a deer pants for the water, so my soul longs for you. We see pictures and paintings of nice, beautiful deer drinking at the deer brooks with this scripture plastered on it. But the reality of it is that dehydrated deer is much more severe. When a deer becomes dehydrated, a couple of things begin to happen that I think we can glean from. Number one, they lose their ability to see. When a deer becomes dehydrated, they lose their ability to see. Things become blurry. The reality becomes distorted. They don't see things as they really are. They get tunnel vision. They see the short term, not the long term. As salespeople, we kind of get in that same mindset. We lose sight of our why. We lose that vision of why we're doing what we're doing. It's more than a paycheck, or it should be. If it's a paycheck to you, find something else that you're passionate about. It's more than just a paycheck. It's more than just the satisfaction of being able to grapple someone to the mat, so to speak. It's more than that. But that's all we see. We lose sight of why we're doing it. We lose sight of the goal. We lose sight of the purpose of why we're doing it. Why do you work where you work? Why do we work at IPD, whether it's selling training or selling automotive advertising? Why do you work at a dealership selling cars? Why do you work at a printing company selling copiers? Why do you work? Why do you do what you do? It can't just be about the money, because what happens when the money's not there? You don't run the race just to win a prize. There has to be some meaning to why you're running it, because nobody is going to get out there in the hot sun, in the heat, and sweat, and burn calves, burn muscles, tear tissues. Nobody's going to do that just because they want to run a race. There has to be a purpose behind it. But as salespeople, we begin to lose focus of that current situation. We focus on the situation, but not the overall purpose. We don't focus on the finish. When we're in the middle of the month and we get dehydrated, we begin to get weary. We're looking at that day. We're not looking at the next hydration station, the end of the month, where we flip it over and begin a new month like we're doing today. So what do I do about that? How do I regain my sight? Number one, write down your goals. You'll hear that in other portions of the academy. We train this all the time here, guys. Write your goals down. Why? Number one, when you put action to your mind, to what you want, it does something inside of you. It becomes reality at that point. It becomes more than just talk. Write it down. Individuals who write down their goals are 42% more likely to achieve them. You are 42%. You got a 42-second head start on those who don't write their goals down. Number two, put visuals of your why on your desk. Some places I've worked before, you get concerned when people don't have pictures of their kids on their desk, or their dogs on their desk, or something on their desk to remind them why they're here. Put that down. What's your goal? You want to buy a new house? Put a picture of the house that you want on your desk. You want to take a cruise? Put a picture of a cruise ship on your desk to remind you why I come in here and get my face beat in every day. Why I come and do what I'm doing. If you're trying to finish school, guess what? Put your student loans, a picture of your student loans, black out the amount because it's nobody else's business, but put that on your desk. You're putting your kids through college? Put a picture of their school or their college on your desk. Why? Because it reminds you, why do I come in here every day and do what I'm doing? Write your purpose down. We have this, a great visual, but it's buried in our playbook somewhere. Put this on your desk. Look at it. You don't do it for yourself. You're doing it for the decision maker. Your purpose is not to make you rich. Your wealth and your prosperity will come when you make this guy rich, when you make him better. Why do you do it? I do it. Why? Because he's worried about his ROI. He's worried about keeping his job. He's worrying about hitting objectives. He's worrying about reaching their stair-step plan. He wants to become the best print shop owner he can be. He's wanting to become the best dealer, the best general manager he can be. Why? You're not doing it for yourself. There has to be a deeper reason why you're doing things. Write them down. And the last thing is this: look for a change of scenery. When you're going through a drought and a dry place, quit going to the same corner to demo somebody. I'm guilty of this. If you're going through a drought of demos, quit coming in here to pitch where nobody can hear you. Stay on the floor. Why? Because others will begin to hear you and they can help you. Quit going to the same. We go and we hide when we get in droughts. The problem is we go hide in the dry spots further and further away from the resource or the water brook. A deer loses its vision, it can't see anymore, and it gets lost, and it can't find that water brook. The second thing, they lose their ability to hear. They lose their ability to see. Number one, they lose their ability to hear. They can't hear the warning sounds from their predators or their surroundings. They can't hear the vibration of the earth below them or the warning shots flying through the air. They can't hear the correction. They can't hear the babbling streams going through the wilderness. They can't hear these things. We as salespeople, all of a sudden we hear training and motivation, but we're not listening to it. There's a difference between hearing it and listening to it. Every Monday morning we come in and we listen to it. Every day of the week we come in and we listen. We log on to the academy and we hear it, but are we listening to it? There's a difference. You're watching the academy now. Are you just hearing it? Or are you listening to it? You see, listening requires a deeper understanding. Knowledge isn't power. Dave says this all the time. Knowledge isn't power. Applied knowledge is. In other words, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't use it, it means nothing. You could be the best mathematician ever, but if you don't apply the training into your accounting position, people are bankrupt. Solicit feedback from others. When people come up to you and say, hey, I heard you do this. Why don't you try this? Listen to them. Pay attention to it. Why? Because they're hearing what you're not. You think you sound fine. You think it's just dumb decision makers on the other end. Well, maybe if every decision maker you talk to is a dumb decision maker, maybe they're not the dumb ones. And I don't mean that in a bad way. If you do the same thing over and over again expecting the same results, that's the definition of insanity. Listen to feedback. A lot of times we can't see or hear the things coming our way. Growing up, you thought your parents were dumb, but now all of a sudden we begin to realize maybe they were right. They saw things that you didn't see. Why? Because they've been places you haven't been. If somebody who's snagging demos comes to you and tries to help you and give you some advice legitimately to make you better, listen to them. Why? Because they're at a place that it's been a while since you've been. If you're getting demos but you're not effectively TOing it or you're not closing deals, find somebody who is. Have them listen to you. Why? Because they're hearing from a different perspective. You're not hearing it. You're closed down. You can't hear. Find those who are having success and listen to what they're doing. Tim, he comes in and every morning he's pulling up recordings of other people's demos. And now he knows he can hear his own. He's going to listen to his. But he comes in every morning and he listens and takes notes and listens and takes notes. And arguably the newest rep we have in this building is snagging more demos than the whole room combined. There's something to it. There's something to listening, to hearing. When you lose your hearing, all of a sudden you're lost. So now you've lost your sight, you can't see. So you're wondering frantically, well, now you can't hear, so you don't even know if you exist anymore. Has anybody felt like that in sales? You don't even know if you exist anymore. You don't even know if you're thinking, what the heck am I even doing here at this point? Why? Because when you lose your hearing, you lose your sense of sight, you have nothing left. Next, they lose their ability to run. They lose their ability to run. They become paralyzed. They can't perform anymore. They don't have the strength to go one more second. They can't sit there. They can't dial the phones anymore. They're literally looking at the phone wondering why the phone's not dialing a number for them. We lose the ability to go outside on the lot and take another up. We just can't do it. We sit in the sales room and just stare at our computer or look at our phones, play a game. You can't go outside. You can't take another up. You can't go to a networking event. You can't bear to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning to go to a B&I presentation or a Chamber of Commerce meeting anymore. You can't. You lose the ability to walk. You lose the ability to run. We isolate ourselves in our cubicle or at our desk so we're not seen. We can't bring it to ourselves to do a call blitz. We literally hide in a place. Here in our office, in the men's bathroom, we have this tabletop, this like drawer, countertop thing. And it stores like, our supplies and things of that nature. But a lot of times you'll see new guys, they're getting hit in the face and they'll just sit there at their computer screen. Well, we'll call them out, say, hey, you all right? Next thing you know, they're in the bathroom for 35, 40 minutes. What they're doing is they're sitting on that countertop paralyzed. They can't step out into the room. They don't know what to do. A deer will become paralyzed when it's dehydrated. So what do? Number one, force yourself to stand up. I didn't say stand up. I didn't say try to stand up. I said force yourself to stand up. Get rid of your chair. Get rid of all the papers on your desk. Put your phone down, flip it over, put it in your locker, put it away. Force yourself to stand up. As I said earlier, find a different place to pitch. Go stand in the middle of the room. We used to have aisles. I don't know, those who have been here for a while remember when we had the aisles and we'd put a piece of tape at the end of the aisle. And when you got a decision maker on the line, you would literally have to come to the end of the tape, stand there and pitch. Why? Because it forced you to stand up and do something. I can remember Dave, when I would get a decision maker on the line, I'd have to stand there until I got one. But once I got one, he'd tap me on the back. He goes, okay, now walk. Why? Because when you're moving, your blood is flowing. Your creative powers begin to churn. At least when the deer is moving, it's at least providing a difficulty for the enemy that's attacking them to catch up to them and actually catch them. When you're moving, things begin to happen. Force yourself to get up early. Go get breakfast. Go work out. Come in the office a little bit early, walk around, become familiar with your surroundings, pump yourself up. Come in early, walk around and pitch. Come in early and talk to people in other departments or other areas of your process. Come in and talk to Jamie in production. Find out what counts are looking like in the market you're going to hit. Come in and talk to branding and marketing and see what they're doing to help build up leads and generate activity. Come in and talk to other salespeople. Come in and talk to the training department. See what the pulse is on decision makers that they're talking to. Come in and talk to marketing. Come in and just pump yourself up. David said you got to encourage yourself. Move. Take action. Begin to step. And then the next thing is, and the last thing as far as the deer it goes, their glands or their pores begin to close to preserve what energy or what water or, as salespeople, what dignity we think we have left. And the scent of death begins to radiate out of them. The stink, they smell. They give out an odor or a perception of death and defeat. We do this with our attitude. This may be kind of the evangelist or the preacher coming out in me, but just from a transparency standpoint, Friday, that was me. What started as something I said kind of joking, all of a sudden pierced my mind. And because I became dehydrated, it was the end of the month and I wasn't necessarily where I wanted to be, all of a sudden my pores began to close to preserve what dignity I felt I had left. All of a sudden I began to close down, I began to shut down, and my attitude began to stink. And then what happened is all of a sudden it began to filter throughout the room. And people started sensing something's not right with Daryl. Oh, something's not right over here. Something's different over here. I don't like that. Well, then it started bringing other people down with me. Why? Because that stink begins to rub off. Everywhere you go, you're leaving the scent of death. And guess what? The enemy smells it. Defeat smells it. Decision makers can smell that you've already given up. Decision makers can already tell that you don't believe what you're saying, that you don't even believe in yourself. Decision makers can begin to hear that. Well, that's what began to happen. To me Friday. So what do I do about it? Go back to number one and look at your visuals of why. Why am I doing this to myself? Because I have 2 kids. Because I have a wife that I need to provide for. Because I've lived in rented a 2-bedroom townhome long enough, I want a house. I've drove a clunker long enough, I want a new car. Why are you doing what you're doing? What is your why? What is your purpose? Why? Get out of the office. Put your headset down, go outside and get some fresh air. Trust me, Dave would rather you go outside, take a lap or a walk around the building than to sit here in the room and it permeate with death and defeat and a bad attitude. Number 3, again, this is where I said eat the meat, spit out the bones. Find your source of strength. Find your source of strength. Find your life source. For us, as in this room that are believers, and those watching that may be believers, you know that's Jesus. Find your water. Find what you need. Discover who you are. Go back to the source of your strength. Whatever you draw, whether you do yoga, or whether you meditate, whatever that may be, go to that point. Go to that place. Go to that source where you go deep. Well, I don't know what that place is. Quick tip, you can write this down if you want to. You can edit this out of the academy. But number one, ask yourself why. And when you get that answer, ask yourself why again. You go deeper. And then when you get that answer, ask yourself why that's your answer there. And when you do that 4 or 5 times, the deeper you go in asking yourself why, about the 5th layer of that pyramid or that onion is when you discover your hidden purpose. You discover your life source. I promise you, you do that this afternoon, number one, you're going to call me crying because you're going to touch a place deep inside of yourself. When the deer, wrapping this up a little bit, when the deer finds that water source, they finally find that brook. They've crawled, they've mustered enough strength, they've pushed through the tough part of it, and they find that source of water. It doesn't just go to the water source and just begin to reach over with its snout or whatever you call and just begin to lap it up like a dog would water. It's not what it does. What a deer will do is it will jump into the water. It'll splash into the water. It will literally take a hop into the water and splash all the water back. What do you mean? They dive into the process. They begin to dive into the process. And when that happens, all of a sudden their pores begin to open and they begin to receive that water. They begin to receive of that life source. And then all of a sudden the sight begins to return. Notice they're still not hearing. They may not be snagging the demos, but all of a sudden they begin to see why they're doing what they're doing. And then all of a sudden they begin to hear. They begin to listen to what's around them, the advice coming in. They begin to listen to their training. Then all of a sudden, they begin to regain their ability to run. They begin to gain their ability to speak. They begin to regain their ability to pitch. They begin to gain their ability to get out and take ups, to go network, to walk in the victory and walk in the training that they know they have. They begin to walk and do what they need to do. And then the water gets in, hydration begins to come back, the stink begins to wear off, and the deer begins to walk in the grace and the agility that it was designed with. Real quick, 4 things is that if you find yourself in a place of constant dehydration. 4 things if you find yourself in a place of constant dehydration. It's one thing to get discouraged, it's one thing to get frustrated, but it's another place to find yourself in the same spot over and over again. Number 1, train. Train. The more training, the better you will be able to fight off fatigue. The more you train, the better you're going to be able to fight off fatigue. And when you stop training, you're going to find yourself worse than you was when you started training. We have a veteran who's been in this company for years, big fish every single month, never stops training. Tommy there's not a day goes by that Tommy does not come in here and jump on Serial Sales Pro like everybody else. He could probably talk and he has the material probably memorized and could probably repeat it line for line, but he still comes in here and trains. Why? Because when he gets in a situation where he has 50K on the board and everybody's above him on the last day of the month, what is he doing? He's fighting for every single piece of mail that he could possibly get. Why? Because he's trained so much that he knows he's able to fight off that fatigue. Number 2, practice. The more you walk through something, the more familiar you are. You notice there's a difference between training and practice. If you're reading a sales book, you're watching training, it's not enough. You have to practice. Pitch to yourself in the mirror. Pitch to a family member. Role play. Call up a coworker. Go through your scripts on the weekends. You've got to practice. Why? I know where the furniture in my house is. If the electricity goes off, I can navigate down the stairs, around the corner, go into my living room, and miss every piece of furniture. But if you rearrange the furniture and do the same thing, I'm going to stub my big toe, all of my big toes. I'm going to stub them before you even know it. Why? because I'm not familiar with it. I haven't practiced walking through those. When you get a new rebuttal you haven't heard before, the market shifts. Practice. Become familiar with the new surroundings. When you add a product, when you add something into your product, practice pitching it. Practice it. Why? Because you begin to become familiar and you're not surprised when you hit it. Number 3, if you find yourself in constant state of dehydration, dig deeper into your spirituality. Discover your personal identity and worth.
That's good.
Know who you are, because if you don't know who you are, you're not going to know what you're doing. Discover your personal identity and worth. Whatever your base is, you may make minimum wage, $8.50 an hour, $9 an hour, whatever. But are you worth the $9 an hour, or are you worth more? Are you worth your base, or are you worth more? Are you worth your commission, or are you worth more? Know what you're worth, and then your paycheck doesn't mean anything. Number 4, find a place and a product you believe in and walk in it. Find a place and product you believe in and walk in. And walk in it. Are you selling the right product? Do you believe in your product? Do you believe in your company? If you don't believe in this company and you don't believe in the product we sell, at the end of this meeting is a good time just to go into the office and tell Dave, say, hey Dave, I don't think I can do this. I don't think this is for me. He'll help you find something that is for you. You can't sell a product you don't believe in. You're not going to run a marathon unless you believe in the race or you're not going to go lift weights if you don't believe that lifting weights is going to actually help you become stronger. Find a place and a product you believe in. If you're working in a car dealership and you're like, I don't believe in making this model, go work at another dealership with that make and model. If you don't believe that you're doing what you need to be doing, go find a place where you are. It may not be in a commissionable job. It may not be that. For you, it may be waiting tables, serving people. Then go do that. If that's what makes you happy, go do where you're fulfilling your sense of purpose. Go where you're supposed to go. Stay hydrated. When you begin to feel yourself getting thirsty, stop and drink. The last thing I want to leave you with, and this literally just came to me this morning. When you drink from the wrong source, your thirst cannot be quenched. Just because it's liquid doesn't mean that it's going to hydrate you. When you're running a marathon, you don't think you're going to stop and get a nice cold Coke in the middle of your marathon, do you? No, why? Because it's not going to hydrate you. It's not going to replace those nutrients. Be careful where you train. This is not a selfless plug for IPD training. I'm not in the training division. I get no money from the training division. But I will say this, is make sure the source of where you train, the source of where you get your information, the source of where you get your encouragement, make sure it's just not self-serving, but make sure they really care about who you are. I'll leave you with this scripture, John 4:13-14 says this, Jesus replied, anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again. But he says that I will give you something to drink that you'll never thirst again. Something that comes from a fresh bubbling spring from within, giving you eternal life. I want to challenge you. Dig deeper in who you are. Hydrate yourself.